The following is a transcript of an address at a private dinner, $1,000 plate, held after the 1960 election by the Friends of the Republic, a political study and action group. The tape was made by the director himself, the only member of the Demindological department old enough to seem like a friend or a likely diner at such a well-laid table. Take it we are all in agreement with that a sizable majority of the American people are conservative at heart, want a conservative government, and will vote for a conservative president any time they get the chance. These truths being self-evident, we must face the repugnant fact in 1960, the American people elected a liberal candidate and turned down our own offering. Furthermore, projections of present political alignments in the state make it all too clear that performance will be repeated again and again, except when we get a non-political and therefore non-conservative, in any real sense, figure to head up the party's ticket. How can these two opposing sets of apparent truths be reconciled? Or, to come down off the high plane of philosophy and into the realm of practicals, how can we manage to get elected again? To this question I shall address myself tonight. In the first place, I think we must face squarely the fact that we ourselves largely responsible for the liberal victory of 1960 and the resulting distress we now find ourselves in nationally. Our responsibility goes back to the heady year of 1947, when we found ourselves, for the first time since Hoover, in control of Congress. I shall not rehearse the genuine accomplishments of that Congress. They are too well known, sometimes I think too well known, in need of repetition. But gentlemen, we stoop to folly in backing the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which forbids a president to succeed himself more than once. As usual, we are acting with the highest of motives. We wish not to take our long overdue revenge on Franklin Roosevelt, but rather to record our history, the country's real reaction hidden by the one-sided majority he received in the elections to Roosevelt's career. What we all forgot was that Roosevelt was already dead and beyond the reach of our punitive action, except for the posthumous impeachment, which, you remember, failed to get a majority in the party caucus. Well, here we are. We saved the country from Roosevelt, but we also saved it from ourselves. Without the 22nd Amendment and with the astonishing geriatric advances being made by the modern medicine, by free enterprise, conservative medicine, we might have successfully run Eisenhower for another 25 years. And in that time, surely someone else would have turned up. As I have traveled about the country since the recent disaster, party workers everywhere have asked me if I think Mr. Eisenhower's golf had anything on the election. I'm afraid it did. No one can ever tell me that the American people will resent a leader who shares their own wholesome interest in sport, but golf may have been a mistake. To be sure, in the past, golf beat tennis handily. Surveys have shown that this was due to what people interpret as the special nature of tennis. More people of voting age play golf than tennis. But the thing that escaped us at the most golfers play in public links on a per-game basis. We undoubtedly carried the country club vote, but there is a sound reason to think that we could have carried that vote with mahjong. The same game, incidentally, might just have been brought out of the silent conservative majority. The total Gulf vote is more complex and may have well gone for the liberal candidate, especially in view of the universal experience of American youth with touch football. My own feeling is that we really need the next time out is a damn good bowler. The foregoing observation have been necessary and, I trust, statuaries remembers and reminds us that to err is human and that we ourselves, whatever the opposition may say, are human. We have made errors and they may be rectified, but actually there seems little doubt that our consistent record of defeat at the hands of the liberals can only be due to the operation of demonics in the Republic. Deminded are at large among our opposition, among their labor support, and even among the electorate. While self-examination is called for every time we lose, we but deceive ourselves if we ignore a strong deminding element between those losses. It has been suggested by some that there are the deminded loose in the American press. I would agree. But I do not share the view that the press deminded operate more effectively among reporters and commentators covering the candidates. There seems to be no reason for doubting the view held by most of us that most American newspapers are liberal themselves and unquestionably lend a liberaling color to their reports. But after all, we do not have this end of things covered. If reporters are liberal, their employers are. All to most men, conservatives. If the reports are filled and filed from a liberal point of view, they are actually printed from the point of view of the publisher who pays not only the reporters, but the editors and the copywriters and the rewrite man and the typesetters. The newspapers publishers of America are among our most loyal supporters. We would be based in gratitude to hit them where it hurts. Yet, the only way to change the liberal thinking of most reporters would be to raise their pay, a dangerous innovation that might not help or might help the party, but that would be certainly injurious to the party's publisher. Nor can I seriously entertain the notion that the deminded reporters can effectively disciplined or be disciplined by the loss of their employment. In the unlikely event that they really do leave the profession, they would all join journalism schools where their ultimate influence would be multiplied by many times. A much more profitable outcome would be a grand shifting around, and the same men ended up on the same assignment for different employers, only to be embitteredly liberal for the move. Closer examination reveals the deminded of the press to be masked and most effective in the other hand of the business and the consumers. Analysis of the return shows city after city in which the voters, from the seer's perversity, cast their ballots directly opposite to the way that they were instructed by the press. This tendency was especially strong in those cities whose both papers are published by the same members of our party's national committee. Difficult as it will be to all, there is only one solution. We must persuade a sizable portion of our publishers to adopt the liberal line and thus get newspaper readers as an antagonistic to liberalism so that they now are conservative. In the excitement of watching the closeness of the popular vote in the 1960 election, some members of the party have come out for reform of the Electoral College. Some have even come out for the abolition of the college, backing the harebrained scheme of having the president elected by the majority of the voters. I cannot warn you strongly enough against this madness. If we are going to start in the direct and for direct popular election, the party is finished. Or, at least until we can solve the master political riddle of our century: how to get the conservative majority to vote. You are all aware that we are more or less a permanent minority in both houses of Congress. We would be a much smaller minority if seats in that body all represented the same number of voters. On the other hand, we managed to maintain at least a veto power in some of the state legislatures. That too rests firmly on the lucky fact that the voters of the country, conservatives, are worth from twice to 4 or 5 times the vote of liberals in the city. Regardless of an occasional presidential fluke, like the last thing in the world we can afford is electoral reform. Cling to the college, if possible, and make it less representative of the people's voice than it is. That way lies our hope only until the conservative majority can be lured to the polls. At last we must come to the real Deminded who defeated us in the last unpleasantness. These are, of course, the labor bosses and their organized minions scattered through the big cities and the heavily industrialized areas. The bosses have been after us for years. It is now apparent that for the last half-dozen elections, their techniques have become more effective. The crux of the whole union strategy has been to get people to register and then get them to vote. For some reason, the unions take it for granted that most people, if they vote at all, will vote liberal. They are right, of course, because the great conservative majority has simply been staying home on election day, an impressive but, alas, ineffective protest against the graduate income tax. Against this vicious campaign of the unions to get people registered and voting, there is little we can do openly since we are committed through the Advertising Association to the idea that voting is a patriotic duty. What can be done otherwise is another matter. If instead of aiming another blow at ourselves through the electoral reform, we push electoral reform, we might be able to unfasten the grip of the Deminded in the unions, and it seems to have upon the voters. It has been mentioned by some party theorists that the old Federalist thought included a property qualification of voters. Since some of our strongest supporters are not property owners in the strict, or realty, federal sense, it has been proposed to restrict suffrage to those of the proper income. A dangerous proposal. I ask you only to compare the income of the average steel worker with that of the average bank clerk and ask yourself who would suffer. The fact is that the union labor, thanks to the outrageous annual demands upon industry of the union bosses, could be met almost any financial test we could reasonably propose. What is really wanted is some way to forbid the vote of members of the union. In many of a state legislature, we have the votes to put such laws through our lawyers and are ready to study the defense against the Supreme Court. You understand, of course, that all these discussions of strategies are interim proposals. All become academic on the day we finally attract the conservative majority out of their political apathy and into the polls. On that day of wrath, even liberal dog catchers and their everlasting cant about finding the hound at a home will be swept out of office. That day, as we have learned so often, is not yet. We cannot lose faith that it will come. I know that recent statistics of voting have been used to prove that the silent conservative majority does not exist. I say those statistics only prove that the conservatives are even more silent than we thought. When figures seem to show themselves, almost all the voters have voted, and that most of them voted for our opponents. Those figures really mean that the conservatives have lost heart, that not only do they not vote, but not only do they not register to vote, they do not record the fact of their birth, and who can blame them?